9 years. I haven't seen you. Where the hell have you been?
Guarding the north for you.
Go back and watch the very first episode. Watch the moment King Robert Baratheon arrives at Winterfell. Watch him climb off his horse and walk toward the Stark family, lined up in the courtyard like soldiers at inspection. And then watch who he touches. He hugs Ned, he kisses Catelyn, he puts his hands on Robb and a hand on Rickon. 4 Starks, 4 points of physical contact, and then he passes the others with nothing but words. He tells Sansa she's pretty. He asks Arya her name. He tells Bran to show him his muscles, compliments, questions, small talk, but no touch. Now, here's the thing. Every Stark Robert touches in that courtyard dies. Ned is beheaded on the steps of the Great Sept of Baelor. Catelyn's throat is cut at the Red Wedding. Robb is stabbed through the heart at the same feast. Rickon is shot through the back by Ramsay Bolton's arrow while running across an open field. 4 touches, 4 deaths. And every Stark he doesn't touch survives. Sansa becomes queen in the north. Arya sails west of Westeros. Bran becomes king of the 6 kingdoms. Jon Snow, who isn't even present in the courtyard because bastards don't stand in the receiving line, outlives them all. I mean, the fandom noticed this pattern years ago and called it the curse of Robert Baratheon. And on the surface, it's a neat piece of foreshadowing, intentional or not. But the real question isn't whether Robert's touch is a curse. The real question is why the pattern works thematically. Because Game of Thrones doesn't do magic curses for the Baratheons. It does consequences. And the reason Robert touches some Starks and not others tells you everything about which Starks will survive and which won't. Not because of a curse, but because of what Robert represents. So, look at who Robert touches and ask yourself, what do those 4 people have in common? Ned is his old friend from the rebellion. Catelyn is Ned's wife, the Lady of Winterfell, the political partner. Robb is the heir, the next Lord of Winterfell, the next Warden of the North, the young man Robert sees as the future of the Alliance. And Rickon is the baby, the youngest son, the one Robert picks up or pats on the head, the way you greet a friend's toddler. Robert touches the people he recognizes as players in his world. The Lord, the Lady, the heir, the child of the Lord. These are the people who matter in Robert's understanding of how Westeros works. Titles, alliances, bloodlines, duty. Look, now ask what the 3 untouched Starks have in common. Sansa is a girl, pretty, marriageable, useful as a future bride, but not someone Robert engages with as a person. He compliments her appearance and moves on. Arya is a child with no political value in Robert's eyes. Wrong gender for an heir, too young for a betrothal, interesting only as a footnote. And Bran is a second son, a spare, a future knight maybe, but nobody Robert needs to invest in politically. Robert passes them because they don't register in his map of power. Their background, furniture, right? And that distinction, who registers in the old world's map of power and who doesn't, is exactly what determines who lives and who dies in Game of Thrones. Well, think about it. Every Stark Robert touches gets pulled into the Game of Thrones as it existed before the series began. Ned goes south to be Hand of the King, the same job that killed Jon Arryn, the same trap Robert is too blind to recognize. He plays by the old rules: honor, truth, confronting the Queen with evidence and giving her a chance to flee. The old rules get him killed. Catelyn plays by the old rules too, seizing Tyrion based on Littlefinger's word, rallying her father's bannermen, trusting in Guest right at the twins. The old rules get her throat cut. Robb plays by the oldest rule of all: when your father is murdered, you raise your banners and march south. He fights an honorable war, wins every battle, and dies at a dinner table because the old rules have no defense against a man like Walder Frey. And Rickon is the most purely tragic case: a child with a Stark name and nothing else, killed simply because he existed in the old world's line of succession, because Ramsay needed him dead, to hold the North. Actually, now look at the survivors. Every Stark Robert doesn't touch survives by learning rules that the old world never taught. Sansa doesn't survive through honor or alliances or battlefield command. She survives by learning from the monsters. Cersei teaches her that power is power. Littlefinger teaches her that chaos is a ladder. Ramsay teaches her that cruelty exists without reason. She takes those lessons and builds something new. A queendom founded not on the old codes of chivalry, but on the hard-won knowledge of how people actually work. Arya doesn't survive by being a lady or a bride or a political piece. She survives by becoming something the old world doesn't have a category for. An assassin trained in Bravos, a girl with no name, a weapon disguised as a teenager. And Bran doesn't survive as a lord or a warrior, or even as a human being in the traditional sense. He becomes the three-eyed raven, a living archive, a consciousness that exists outside the game entirely. The old world can't kill what it can't comprehend. You see, Jon Snow is the most interesting case because he's literally not in the courtyard. He's standing off to the side, behind the family, because bastards don't stand in the receiving line. Robert never reaches him. He's invisible to the king, and Jon's entire arc is defined by that invisibility. He goes to the wall, the one place where names and titles don't matter, and he builds a life outside the power structure Robert represents. When he does die, murdered by his own men at Castle Black, he comes back. The old world kills him, and he returns as something the old world can't process, a resurrected bastard with a secret royal bloodline who refuses to play the game. Basically, Robert's arrival at Winterfell is the show's sorting ceremony. He walks down the line and unknowingly divides the Starks into two groups, the ones who will be consumed by the old world and the ones who will outlive it. The ones he touches are the ones he sees, the lord, the lady, the heir, the youngest son. The ones he skips are the ones he can't see, the ones the old power structure has no use for. The girl who's too pretty to be a person, the girl who's too wild to be a lady, the boy who's too young to be a soldier, the bastard who isn't there at all. Robert's blindness isn't a curse, it's a diagnosis. He can only see the world he knows, and the world he knows is already dying. And yet, there's a deeper irony buried in this scene that connects to Robert himself, because Robert is also a man trapped in the old world. He won his throne through rebellion, through swords and warhammers and the old codes of combat, and now he's fat, drunk, miserable, and married to a woman who despises him. His kingdom is bankrupt. His children aren't his. His best years are behind him. Robert arrives at Winterfell as the ghost of his own rebellion, still telling war stories, still talking about Lyanna, still living in a past that ended 17 years ago. He's the walking proof that the old world is finished, and he touches the Starks who are most like him, the ones who will try to live by the same expired rules and die for it. Again, notice what Robert says to each person he touches. To Ned,
"You got fat."
a joke between old warriors who used to be young. Then, after embracing Catelyn,
9 years. I haven't seen you. Where the hell have you been?
the disbelief of a man reuniting with the family he left behind. To Robb,
Who have we here?
It's been Robb.
assessing the next generation of the Alliance. These are the exchanges of the old world, lord to lord, king to vassal, father to friend's son, the language of duty and bloodlines and men who shake hands to seal pacts, and every single one of those pacts, sealed with a handshake, an embrace, a kiss on the cheek, will be broken before the show is over. The thing is, what Robert says to the untouched Starks is different in kind, not just in warmth. To Sansa,
Aye, you're a pretty one.
he sees a face, not a person. To Arya,
Your name is?
he doesn't even know it. To Bran, show us your muscles, you'll be a soldier. He projects a future onto a child that will never come true. Bran will never be a soldier. He'll be something Robert's vocabulary doesn't contain a word for. Robert's comments to the surviving Starks are all wrong. Wrong predictions, wrong categories, wrong assumptions about what these children will become. And that wrongness is the show's first quiet signal that the world, as Robert knows it, is about to be replaced by something he can't imagine. You know, Ned says something to Robert on the King's Road South that most people forget. Robert asks him to come south, and Ned says,
"You have asked me 20 years ago."
That's not just reluctance. That's a man who knows, somewhere deep, somewhere he won't admit, that the invitation is a death sentence. That going south means entering a world that has moved beyond the rules they grew up with. Robert should have asked 20 years ago, when the old rules still worked. He didn't. And by the time he does ask, the old world is already a grave. Technically, Robert Baratheon's arrival at Winterfell is the last moment all the Starks are alive and together in the same place. Every frame of that scene is the end of something. The end of the Stark family as a unit. The end of Ned's quiet life in the north. The end of the world where honor and duty and guest right meant something. And the king who rides through the gate is the engine of that destruction. Not because he's evil, but because he's obsolete. He carries the old world with him like a disease, and everyone he embraces catches it. The people he loves are the people he dooms. So the next time you watch Robert Baratheon walk down that line of Starks in the Winterfell courtyard, hugging, kissing, patting heads, passing others by, don't look at who he touches. Look at who he doesn't. Look at the girl he calls pretty without seeing. Look at the girl whose name he doesn't know. Look at the boy he tells to be a soldier. Look at the bastard standing behind the family, out of the king's sight. Those are the ones who live, not because they were spared by a curse, but because they were invisible to a world that was already dead.